What's cracking, trainers? XehrFelrose here, bringing you some Pokemon GO Battle League content. Today's video, we're bringing back Dialga. Hopefully you're able to get a good origin form for PvP. We're going to be taking a look today at Dialga's origin form in the Master League, going through it in our granular style as usual, looking from the range of 12 to 14 attack, defense, and HP IVs to see what matchups are affected in the Master League if we have to thrift on Dialga's stats. And at the end, we'll talk about our best minimum recommended IV spreads for the Master League. As always, when I do these deep dives, I'm going to do a quick breakdown of the terms that are going to be popping up in this video so you can get up to speed on your vocabulary. I'm assuming this is your first deep dive, and if it's not, welcome back. Breakpoints are going to be an attack stat point that allows you to deal 1 additional damage in a given matchup with a fast or charged attack, and it's most effective when used on shorter fast moves like Dragon Breath, 1 or 2 turn moves specifically. Bulk point, inversely, is a defense stat point that allows you to take 1 less damage in a given matchup, and if we're talking about 0s, 1s, and 2s, or any mix of those, that's going to be talking about shielding situations. And this video assumes all matchups are even energy and on standard movesets unless stated otherwise. When it comes to our IV spreads, we'll nail them down between thrift and premium level kind of IVs, where premium is going to be including the common or noteworthy matchups as well as some nice to haves, whereas the thrifty IVs are going to give up on those less common scenarios to make sure that you're maintaining the critical core matchups of a Dialga in the Master League. We're bringing up the best buddy boosted. That's denoted by 2 Bs. Double B adds 2 power-ups or 1 level to your Pokemon when equipped as your buddy. And if we're talking about CMP or charge attack priority, that's when both Pokemon throw a charge move at the same time. The one with the higher attack stat will win out. Not necessarily the IVs, but the actual raw attack stat, which of course isn't accessible information in the game, and you have to go to PvPoke to figure out what the actual number is, but maybe someday that'll get fixed, who knows. Now, as far as Dialga against the majority of the Master League, it's going to be very good in its spot as the dragon that beats the other dragons, given that it has that steel subtyping. Dialga is a very strong answer to things like Palkia Origin and both White and Black Kyurem. Also has some nice pickups in the form of Dawnwing's Necrozma, Lunala. Even able to grab Ho-Oh as a win now in the Master League, with the increased energy gains of Dragon Breath making a huge difference for Dialga and other dragons as well. As long as you don't take that Earthquake. Rhyperior also is now a win for Dialga, which it used to be its worst enemy, but Rhyperior doesn't have Breaking Swipe anymore, and now with the increased pacing, Dialga is able to consistently outpace to those Iron Heads or that knockout. Kyogre and Lugia are also things that Dialga wins, but as far as its losses go, it is getting absolutely thrashed, and I mean cooked to a crisp by Crownzation and Zamazenta. They are just going to be able to have their way with this poor dragon. Therian Landorus, a lesser known entity nowadays in the Master League, but still there, does beat Dialga very convincingly. And Duskmane Necrozma, also something that will be able to take that Dialga matchup. Groudon, Solgaleo, Metagross, Zekrom, Togekiss, all also being things that exist in this Master League meta that are going to be able to beat Dialga Origin. Now, before we get into the different stat weights, we're going to take a quick look and see what Dialga gains by equipping a best buddy boost here. And I'm gonna be honest, I feel like it really doesn't need it, and that's a good thing because we're always looking for that one perfect thing to put our best buddy boost on, and Dialga convincingly to me does not seem like the thing. Here's what you're gonna gain in Zero Shield scenarios. You're gonna be grabbing an Amorous Incarnate, Giratina Origin, and best buddied Shadow Dragonite, Urshifu Single Strike form, Mega Gengar, and Gyarados. Things that are not really critical matchups for Dialga. I feel like it just kind of wins what it wins and loses what it loses in a pretty linear fashion. You're going to be able to flip some one shield matchups. Again, Giratina Origin. We're going to have Reshiram with the best buddy boost on with Dragon Breath. Shadow Groudon is an interesting thing to be able to flip here, as it does rely on that CMP tie where Shadow Groudon and Dialga both get to that finishing charge move at the same time. If the opponent's Florges is best buddied, you also be able to flip that matchup, as well as a Giratina Origin in the 1-2s if it's best buddied. However, I feel like the Solgaleo matchups do kind of matter here, because Solgaleo is a pretty good answer to Dialga, so being able to grab that in a couple scenarios here is kind of nice. You're also able to flip the best buddy Mega Scizor matchup in the 2-2 shield situation, or whenever you want to bust out your Dialga for the Mega Master League. You're getting some break points against Shadow Gyarados, Shadow Salamence. But Florges as a best buddy is nice to be able to get. You also pick up Dragonite and Mega Salamence breakpoints with the best buddy boost. And then for bulk points, again, that's us taking 1 less damage from the opponent's fast moves against Solgaleo and Giratina Origin. If the opponent has best buddy on, Urshifu, Rhyperior, Primal Groudon, Primal Kyogre, and Mega Lucario are all things that we are going to be grabbing an extra bulk point against, none of which really seem like they flip matchups. Aside from the Urshifu, we are going to be grabbing the CMP tie over base form Groudon, Kyogre, and opposing Dialga Origin. And in addition to the CMP CMP tie, we're also going to be grabbing the mirror win against opposing Dialga Origins as long as they are not best buddied, and we keep a mirror tie against best buddied Dialga Origins. So as far as Dialga's attack stat goes, this is the non-best buddied version versus other non-best buddied Pokemon. And the only things that really get affected here are going to be the CMPs that we mentioned earlier with Groudon, Kyogre, and the Mirror. Dragonite pops in with breakpoints lost, so we're doing 1 less damage to that, and Mega Salamence. And we're also going to be dropping the Mirror in multiple situations, basically all evens. And Shadow Dragonite, regular Dragonite, and Shadow Groudon pop in with matchups being affected because of the breakpoints being lost there. Florges also creeps onto our list if we drop down to 13 attack, with that breakpoint lost mattering in that matchup in the 1-2 shield scenario. And honestly, Florges is going to be popular enough that I'm really thinking that Florges needs to be on the list of things that we need to keep on our list of wins. Down at 12 attack, we had a couple new things down at 12 attack, including a CMP tie loss to Latios, as well as a Mega Altaria loss in the 0-1s. Against best buddied opponents, we are going to see a few more things pop up here. Goodra with Draco Meteor able to clown us with that heavy hitting nuke move it's got. Otherwise, we are going to be dropping some Solgaleo best buddied matchups in the 0 shields, so keep that in mind as we are going to be wanting to take a look at that later on in the video. So with a best buddied Dialga versus non-best buddied meta, the only thing that gets affected down at 14 attack is Shadow Gyarados. Besides that, when we get down to 13, we're going to start seeing the mirror pop up as losses. Shadow Groudon comes back. A lot of the same stuff is coming back, as was on the list of the non-best buddied versus non-best buddied situations. And that list is almost identical here with best buddied parity, with very few things showing up here that weren't before, like Reshiram in the 1-1s especially. And we're seeing Florges pop back up on the list as far as 13 attack goes. So you have to make sure that we're keeping in mind these numbers, because what we're going to use at the end is we're going to use these numbers to determine what stat points our Dialga needs to hit. Now, when it comes to Dialga Origin's defensive stat weighting, there's a lot of things that show up on this list, but not really all of them matter. There's not a whole lot of single strike Urshifus running around, but just in case you find one, you are going to end up losing the zeros because of a bulk point that you're losing if you drop down to 14 defense. However, Rhyperior, Primals, and Mega Lucario are very niche scenarios that you're probably not going to see very much of, unless you're playing some grassroots tournament or you bust out your Dialga in the Mega Master League, but it does not seem that any of the matchups get flipped one way or the other. Down at 13 defense, though, we're going to see regular Kyogre pop up on the list of losses here in the 1-2s, and I think that's an important one to maintain because Dialga needs to be able to beat Kyogre as just a function of being a dragon. And if I can, I want to make sure that we keep that Kyogre matchup on lock. There's some other things that are going to pop up on the list here, but realistically, the only things that end up really making a difference here could be things like Gyarados, which might be a little bit more common in the Master League going forward, but Kyogre is really the main one here. Now, if the opponents have best buddy equipped, that Kyogre loss jumps up to the 14 defense rate, so we have to keep this one in our heads. We're also going to be dropping the 2s against Latias if it's got the best buddy boost, so if Latias and Latios start getting more popular, you might want to keep this one in mind. And Florges actually ends up becoming relevant if we drop down as far as 12 defense, so I would draw an absolute line here if we want to make sure that if we're not rocking best buddy on the Dialga, which we've already said isn't super impactful, then we're going to want to end up making sure that we have at least that 15 defense if possible to keep Kyogre. Otherwise, we can drop as low as 13 to make sure that we're maintaining that Florges matchup in the 2-2 situation. And with best buddy parity, once again, both of us having the best buddy boost, we do see Kyogre popping up once again at the 13 defense mark, so making sure that we have more than that is going to be critical in keeping that matchup. The rest of the things that are on this list are very unique niche situations that, while good to know if you lose them or not, are not going to be common enough for us to need to focus our raid luck around trying to get a Dialga that handles that. Now, the nice thing about the HP stat on Dialga is that if it's down at 14 HP, it actually has the same value as if it has 15 HP. So that's almost like a freebie stat that we can drop if we need to. And the same is also true for when you best buddy it. It has the same HP stat when you're at 15 versus 14. So you'll see no matchups affected for any of the scenarios in this particular section. However, drawn at 13 and 12 HP, we are going to start seeing some matchups get affected. It's up to you whether or not those are important ones. As always, these are meant to be informatory and not to tell you what you should or should not build. Against best buddied opponents, there's really not a whole lot popping up here. Melmetal in the 0-2s, that's assuming that the Melmetal is not running superpower. It's on, like, I think double Iron Bash and Thunderbolt. So not necessarily going to be every Melmetal you meet, but it's good to know that you do lose that matchup if they're not running superpower. Even more forgiving with the best buddy boost here. No differences until you drop down to 12 HP, and that's just against Gyarados and Amorous Incarnate and Salamence. with all the best buddy boosts equipped on both sides. Again, not a whole lot happening here. Enamorus, Giratina, Mega Gengar, Salamence popping up Latias in the 2-2s. These are all things that I would not be particularly worried about. So HP seems really thriftable if you need to. I don't see any matchups here that would prevent me from wanting to build a, for example, 15-15-12 Dialga Origin. So when we're taking a look at Dialga Origin as a whole here, the critical matchups that are really important for us to maintain, as far as the ones that have popped up in this video, you definitely want to make sure that the mirror is going to be something that you can handle. That's going to require at least 14 attack with a best buddy boost against non-best buddied. You're going to need 15 attack against non-best buddied, and then if the opponent has the best buddy boost and you don't have 15 attack and a best buddy boost, you will lose that mirror matchup. Florges has a couple of different ways that it's able to overcome the Dialga here, and that's going to be with the attack and defense weighting. So we want to make sure that if we're going to win this Florges matchup consistently against all types of Florges, we need 240 attack and 199.1 defense. The attack requirement for Florges is going to require us to be at the best buddy boost in order to even get there. While I consider Florges an important matchup, if it's not worth your best buddy boost just to be able to beat it, then I wouldn't worry too much about it. But in case you do want to make sure that your Dialga can handle it consistently, you will need 240 attack and 199.1 defense to be able to make sure you survive all of the scenarios that Florges is able to flip based on those stat points. Kyogre also not really being too kind to us here, going to require 201.6 defense to beat the best buddied Kyogre. That's a pretty high rate for Dialga's defense. However, if you're only interested in beating the non-best buddied Kyogre, there is a little bit of wiggle room there. As far as the nice to have matchups go, the only ones that came up that felt consistent, aside from Latios and Latias, which are definitely nice to have, but aside from those, I like the ability to flip Shadow Groudon. Solgaleo, being able to flip that in certain situations is nice. However, it requires really high stat weights to be able to do. 202.8 is only able to take the non-best buddied Solgaleo. If the opponent has a best buddied Solgaleo, they're just dogging on your Dialga anyway. 238.6 attack is also not difficult for us to hit, especially if we're already trying to account for the Florges and Dialga Origin mirror. Gyarados has some interesting stat requirements to be able to beat it consistently, and that's up to you. Again, it's not something that I would consider mission critical, but 202 defense and 184 HP just to maintain a 0-1 shield matchup is pretty high, and so it's up to you if it's worth it. Here are some of the IVs spreads that I was able to find. Now, I tried to do a couple of different ways here because I realized that the way that I plugged them in on pvpivs.com is actually only giving me best buddied spreads. So I had to force it to give me some non-best buddied spreads. But here are the 3 premium spreads that gets everything that we need it to have with the best buddy boost equipped. And that's really a tight squeeze, right? 15, 14, or 13 HP with perfect stats across the board otherwise. In order to keep the best buddied Florges, though, you can drop down to 14 attack and still keep that. However, it will end up dropping some other scenarios that we've talked about. Some premium IVs without best buddy that do drop the Shadow Groudon is going to be a mix of 15 and 14 attack and HP with a 15 defense stat. Now, I will say before we go any further, if you haven't heard my rant about attack stats yet so far in this video, I definitely would not recommend building anything less than 15 attack if you can help it. However, 14 attack is buildable if you best buddy it. I would definitely consider using a bottle cap on it later on just to be able to lock down some of those matchups. Now, these are some thrifty looking IVs, and these are keeping the critical matchups. We want to make sure that we're able to maintain all mirror matchups against Dialga Origin if they're not rocking the best buddy boost. These spreads also maintain the Kyogre and Florges matchups that were affected by the stat weights. So while the HP stat is super cope at this point, down all the way as far down as 11, these are buildable spreads, but I would absolutely caution you, if you can, try to get some lucky trades to try to get better IVs before investing in some of these other more suspect thrift IVs, because Dialga Origin is one of those Pokemon that, while it doesn't necessarily have to be super high IVs in order to perform to its best, it definitely appreciates being able to have the option to be able to handle things like Solgaleo in certain situations if it wants to. So I would say that it is very nice to be able to have a high IV Dialga Origin, but it's not completely necessary, and you could absolutely get by with any one of these spreads as long as you have the best buddy boost equipped. And for some of these, you might not even need it. If you want, you can plug in the actual stat points of what you specifically want to win matchups for and start figuring out what spreads you need based on the numbers that you need to hit, similar to the way that I've done it over on pvpivs.com. And just a quick little outro bit here. Thank you for watching, as always. I appreciate y'all for hanging out, watching these videos. If you decide you like the content and you want to see more, please consider liking the video. Hitting subscribe does help the channel grow. And if you have any questions, drop a comment down below. I'll do my best to be able to answer what I can. I try to look at all my comments. And also, I'd love to know if you guys have any deep dives that you'd like to see next. I have a list of ones that I want to do, but I'm always open to suggestions. And I appreciate y'all, as always, for watching. Thank you very much, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.